He started small, a rumor at work, then a fake DM, then a public post that cost me my job. They believed him. For a minute, I thought it was the end. But I kept every screenshot. And when I finally pushed back, everything he built started to fall apart. My name is Martha. I'm telling you this because for a while, I couldn't speak. Not without being interrupted by messages, not without people making faces like they already knew the worst. He made sure of that. Before all of this, it was ordinary. We met in the city, at a mutual friend's dinner. He made me laugh, and somewhere between the second glass of wine and a bad karaoke night, we found ourselves leaning into each other like two people who thought maybe they'd found something steady. We dated for a couple of years. I loved my job, project management at a mid-sized tech firm, and I loved him for the small things. How he made me eggs on a Tuesday, how he'd show up when my car wouldn't start. He had his own life too, freelance gigs, a loud group of friends, big weekend plans. We fit, imperfectly, but well enough. Then, like most things that implode, it started small. We fought, normal couple fights about money, time, plans. The real fracture came when he told me, out of the blue, that he didn't want to be tied down. He wanted flexibility, more travel, not the whole settling down package. That night he left. Not a big dramatic scene. He packed a bag and left. No pleading. No negotiation. Just a note on the counter that said, "I'm sorry. I can't do this." I was stunned. Hurt. Then the confusion came. Why did it feel like there was an audience watching the end of us? Because within a week, the whispers started. At work, people who'd always been polite started giving me the side eye. A manager who used to joke with me kept his distance. It was subtle, then sharp. Someone said, "You'll want to handle the client pitch alone." The implication there felt like a drop of cold water. A month after he left, it escalated. A message thread from an old acquaintance surfaced with a screenshot. He'd told a friend a story about me. Not a story of a fight or a breakup. He'd told an invented scene, one designed to make me look untrustworthy. A rumor that made me sound like someone who'd stolen from him, who'd lied about money. And because this was the internet age, one person's screenshot metastasized into three people's gossip and then to the office water cooler. Then the social posts appeared. Anonymous, at first, a post from a local gossip page that implied I was playing both sides, then a throwaway tweet that someone tagged my company in. People started asking questions. Clients sent cold, formal emails. I felt the floor move under me. The worst part wasn't what he said. It was how people believed him. I had always been a person who kept receipts, literally. I kept contracts, emails, messages, little things that proved what happened and when. But I'd never thought I'd need those receipts for my own life. One morning, HR called me into a meeting. My stomach dropped in a way I've only felt twice in life. The day my father had a heart attack and the day someone suggested my job might be in jeopardy. That HR meeting was awkward and clinical. "There's been a complaint," they said. "We need to investigate." They used neutral words, but the subtext was clear. Someone claimed I'd done something unethical. The client's account was paused. My responsibilities were reassigned. I left the building dazed, the fluorescent lights on the floor blending into one big, accusing glare. At home, my phone didn't stop. Screenshots, anonymous DMs, direct questions. Is it true? I read them in panic and felt something inside me harden. Panic turned to fury and then to resolve. I wasn't going to let a lie bulldoze the years I'd worked. Not quietly. Not without a fight, so I did the one thing I should have done from the start. I gathered every piece of paper, every screenshot, every text, and I put them in one place. Emails with him about splitting rent. Receipts that proved I paid for things we'd both used. My work files that showed the timeline of projects. I printed the messages where he'd admitted in private that he was fed up and wanted out. I wrote down dates. I timestamped. I backed everything up to the cloud and to a flash drive. Next, I reached out. I called a friend in PR, someone who knew how narrative works. She listened for 10 minutes and then said, "You have to trace the origin. Where did the first post come from? Who's tagging who?" She helped me see the smear not as a moral failure but as a chain of digital breadcrumbs. We mapped it. I also called other friends I trusted at my company. I told them, plainly, what was true. Some believed me immediately. Others were tentative, damaged by surprise. One of my co-workers, who'd been in my corner years, said, "Send HR everything." He walked me through how to present the evidence so it would be seen as a coherent case. Not a flailing defense. It's funny, when you're on the defensive, everything feels raw. But when you put evidence on a page, it becomes process. It becomes something legal, not just emotional. I filed an internal complaint with HR that included screenshots, the original DM chain, the public posts, the messages where he'd said things that contradicted his public version. I added witness names and timestamps. I asked them to freeze the client account only if there was cause. I asked for an impartial investigation. That first month was brutal. I woke to new posts. I got anonymous voicemail threats. But I also got calls, friends who said, "We have your back." My small circle started to act like a team. We printed receipts at 2 a.m. We traced IP addresses where we could. We saved cached pages. It became detective work, basically, a sometimes tedious and sometimes thrilling reconstruction of an alternate narrative. When HR finally spoke, they were more careful. They couldn't act on hearsay. They needed facts. But they also couldn't ignore repeated complaints. They brought the legal department into a limited investigation. The client we'd paused demanded an explanation. That pressure is how workplaces often resolve things, not by moral clarity but by risk mitigation. I also got a consultation with an employment lawyer. I'll be honest, I didn't want to escalate to lawyers. I worried it would make me seem bitter. But the lawyer's advice was pragmatic: document, preserve, and push. There are rules about defamation and workplace smear campaigns. She told me what would actually stand up in front of an HR panel or a civil suit and helped me prioritize the evidence. Then I made the decision to go public on my own timeline. Not with anger, but with facts. My PR friend helped me draft a short statement. There have been false statements made about me. I welcome any investigation and stand ready to provide evidence. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't say his name. It said the truth, that there were allegations, and I had evidence. The goal wasn't vengeance, it was to change the narrative from rumor to investigation. That statement landed like a small, precise tool. People noticed the calm. Journalists sometimes sniff stories from the scent of drama. They also respect a paper trail. A local business blog that had published the initial gossip reached out for comment. I gave them a succinct set of facts and copies of the messages. They asked tough questions. I answered with documents. The story shifted from salacious rumor to a story about workplace rumors and the consequences. But the real turning point was when a former mutual friend, who had been on the edges of the original gossip thread, texted me privately and said, "I have screenshots he sent me," before he posted. She sent a folder. In it were messages where he invented details that never happened. He'd created a narrative and fed it to people like a gardener plants seeds, watering only the parts he wanted to grow. Armed with that, HR's investigation gained teeth. They interviewed him. They matched timestamps. He tried to spin it like he was upset or it was just talk. But talk that you send in DMs, that you post publicly, that you forward to coworkers, talk becomes action when it damages someone's livelihood. HR placed him on an administrative leave while they finished the inquiry. What I hadn't expected was how fast the social media ecosystem would flip. The initial posts spread because they were juicy. The corrections spread slower, because corrections rarely get the algorithm's love. So we amplified the correction. The blog published the documents. Friends shared them. A podcast covered the story with a focus on evidence. People who had been quick to judge retraced their steps and apologized privately. My inbox filled with "I'm sorry and I had no idea." Meanwhile, there were consequences outside the company. The freelance platforms where he worked were contacted with documented proof that he'd been dishonest with clients. A vendor he'd relied on for referrals pulled the plug when they saw the evidence. He suddenly had fewer places to hide. The guy who once thought a spicy rumor could be a career strategy found himself isolated. There was one dramatic moment I'll never forget. The person who had started the rumor in our circle, the one he'd shown his fabricated messages to, agreed to record a statement admitting they'd never verified the claims and that the messages had been manipulated. It was short. It was humiliating for them. But it mattered more than the 1,000 angry replies. It mattered because it was a witness stepping back and saying what they'd actually seen. When HR concluded its investigation, they terminated our professional ties with him. For a person who made a living on trust and contacts, being shown the exit, with documented reasons, is devastating. He tried to sue me for defamation. I didn't panic. My lawyer had prepared me. He dropped it after his lawyer realized that our documentation was too solid and that a countersuit for malicious falsehoods could cost him far more. In the months after, life steadied. I kept working. Some clients who'd been cautious came back. The scar of the smear lingered, like a bruise you can still feel when you touch it, but it faded. I learned practical skills: how to archive social pages, how to subpoena where necessary, how internal HR processes work. I made new boundaries. I learned to say no to people who wanted to turn my story into content. I also learned to accept apologies cautiously, watching for repair not just for words. There's a deep lesson here that I didn't expect: documentation matters more than spectacle. People remember the loudest thing that was said, but when it comes to accountability, the quiet paper trail is crystalline. You can't always win by shouting. You win by collecting the receipts and presenting them logically and patiently. And there's another lesson: community matters. I had friends who texted me in the middle of the night, who printed documents with me, who sat across the coffee table and said, "We got you." Those people are not just background characters, they are the difference between being buried and being heard. So what about him? His reputation collapsed in increments. Clients left. Collaborators unfollowed. The speaking gigs he'd lined up evaporated. He tried to rebuild like many do, apologizing half-heartedly on different platforms, posting vague statements about mistakes without specificity. But the record kept growing. He'd traded a life of casual charisma for one where every word might be examined. He suddenly had to prove he could be trusted where once people had assumed it. I'm not suggesting he deserves ruin as entertainment. What I am saying is, there's accountability for actions. Our systems, HR, contracts, legal instruments, public records, can be used to correct a harmful narrative when used calmly and rightly. It's not revenge, it's structure. If you ever find yourself in the same place, here's the checklist that helped me more than anything: preserve everything, timestamp, ask witnesses for statements, consult HR and legal early, go public if it helps the facts to be known, and build a support network that will vouch for your character. Don't engage wildly on social media, record and route. That discipline matters. Now, months later, I'm not a headline. I'm someone who got bruised and learned new armor. I rebuilt my career, and I also learned how to protect it. People now ask me about how I handled it. I tell them the truth. It hurt, it scared me, and the part that saved me was work, the kind that keeps records and keeps receipts, plus friends who would stand up and say what they saw. There's no neat revenge montage. There's a long series of small acts that add up to repair. If this story resonated, please like and subscribe. Remember, lies feel loud, but facts last. Keep your evidence. Keep your calm. Let structure do the heavy lifting. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next story.